evening, everyone who's joined us and those watching the video afterwards. I'm very pleased to report that after 3 months of trying, we've managed to arrange a session about Choreo and ballerina. And Chintana Ramuna from WSO2 is very kindly giving us a demonstration or an introduction and illustration of how this system is used. I wish I could tell you what's happening in August. Unfortunately, I've not managed to arrange a session for that as yet. So anybody who's got something to share, please come forward and we'll arrange it. I'm going to get out of the way and hand over the floor to Chintana. Welcome.
Thank you, Iman team, for the opportunity to present Choreo. So I'm going to start with a couple of slides to set the stage first and the scenario and what I'm going to present, and then dive into Choreo and give you a overview of what capabilities we have. So I'm Chintana. I am Senior Director Solutions Architecture at WSO2. Have been WSO2 with many years, working closely with customers to help them to implement their business use cases with WSO technology. And brief overview of capabilities, products, solutions we have. We have, of course, Choreo we'll be deep diving in today. And that's API management, integration, plus service creation framework. And then we position it as a full digital platform as a service, where it's essentially a batteries included platform where developers can log in and then start creating their services, APIs, and integrations. And we have also Asgardio, which is an identity and access management service on the cloud. And then we have our on-premise products. This has been our historical, that's where WSO2 got started, creating API management and integration solutions. And then we have also an identity and access management solution that's primarily focusing on customer identity and access management, which is a hot topic these days that goes by the acronym CIAM. And then we have solutions for open banking, implementing some open banking specifications, and also open healthcare solution that implements FHIR specs. And of course, we do strategic consultancy, professional services, and training on all these products. So before diving into Choreo, I want to get a very simple use case where you are a developer and you are maybe in startup mode or starting up with a new project. And usually this is what the application architecture looks like. You have some UI and then you have some kind of backend, and then possibly connected to a DB or any other storage system. And you want to iterate and get your ideas implemented as fast as possible. So you are not thinking about complicated scenarios when it comes to scaling and so on at this phase. However, with time, when your application becomes successful, you have to think a lot about the other capabilities, how you scale, how you enable API management, how you enable consumable interfaces so that you can reuse things you already have very quickly, and being able to utilize those and then build new capabilities really, really fast. And then connect that to other applications, web UI, etc. And then handling things like security and also deployment and continuous integration. So a lot of things that comes into place with scale, and also the things that you don't really think about when you're at the startup mode, like software engineering best practices. Now you have to invest a lot and then implement the correct policies at the right places to be able to handle scale and also handle increased number of development team and then other operations personnel and so on. So there are a lot to think about from going from a very simple application to what you call, or what we usually known as a complete distributed architecture when it comes to applications. And then there are many problems to think about. And when you are essentially at the startup phase, you are possibly concentrated on the development phase, especially on source control and then debugging and then running the application and get into production as soon as possible. But with scale, you have to think a lot, and then you probably know already that development tasks in a large organization, a large complex software system, is just a small portion of it. You have to think about design aspects, user stories, solutions architecture, and then interfaces, security architecture, compliance, and then being able to reuse existing services, and then discovering services through a marketplace, having templates for new developers to quickly adapt and then write services. And then on the deployment sides, how to create repeatable builds, containers, CI/CD, and then also pipelines, how to integrate these pipelines into different environments, and then have some kind of secret management so that you are not really storing credentials on plain text files or passing around in plain text. And then being able to test your APIs, unit test and also load test, and then also governance when it comes to exposing a managed interface to other systems. How do you govern? How do you add policies? How do you secure these services, especially internal services, as well as other APIs that you expose to public-facing web application and other ecosystem partners, and then defining usage plans, monetization, and then of course alerting, monitoring, having some kind of a monitoring infrastructure in place that hooks you up into existing APIs and services you create is very, very important to understand the behavior of these systems. And when you are at scale running hundreds of microservices, tracing also becomes a key part of how to identify a call going from one service and then trickle down into your other microservices, and also talking to other data stores is very important. And it's another critical and time-consuming phase, time-consuming task when you have an issue to trace down a complex integration flow. So a lot to think about that aspect, and that is the stage where Choreo is introduced to take care of a lot of these tasks that you have to deal with, or that we all have to deal with when you are creating new projects, new integrations, and being able to going from a very simple idea to a very complex idea, and then incorporating these best practices as quickly as possible. And then you don't have to think about as developers whether you are writing a very small application or whether you are writing an application for a large number of users and applications. So the demo that I'm going to showcase now is a very typical example. So this, like the use case that we talked about in a distributed scenario, I'm going to take one use case here, one flow, and then demonstrate how to create a service, and then create another API, and then do a call outs to two different services, and then expose a well-defined API through the platform. So to deep dive in, we're going to be creating one API called customers, and then that's tied into a database. I already have this database, and then have some data about customers, and then have another database that has order details of customers. And then what we are going to do here is that first we are going to create this customers API that connects to a database, and then expose and filter out some data. And then we are going to create another API that again calls this API to get a list of customers, extract the customer number, and then call out to a database, and then filter out some other records from a different table, and then expose that as an API. And then I'll showcase along the way the capabilities that are built into Choreo that make life easy for developers. So I'm going to switch tab in my browser, and then this is Choreo. You can go to choreo.dev and then sign up for an account. And also you have the option of exploring the platform anonymously as well. So you can, without having to give your email address, you can explore functional capabilities of the platform there as well. So once you log in, you can see the recent projects that you've created. And then there are a couple of what you call templates or component templates that you can use to create a REST API proxy. So REST API is essentially you are creating a service, and proxy, REST API proxy is you have your actual service implementation somewhere else, and then you want to create a POC proxy out of it. And also we support what you call manual trigger. Manual trigger is just like a program, like a main program, a program with a main method that you can trigger manually. And then we have what you call scheduled tasks. You can schedule a task to trigger in certain intervals. And also a webhook, where you can create a webhook service that will get triggered based on a different action. Like for example, one way would be you want to connect to existing GitHub repo, and then based on some action that happens in that GitHub repo, that will fire an event, and then in turn that will fire a webhook event, a webhook, the webhook that you design here in the Choreo platform. And we are also working on WebSocket and gRPC support. That's going to come soon. Also, we have here some getting started templates where you can get started from certain predefined templates and then configure your integration scenario as well. And if you go to these predefined templates, we are working on adding more of these templates. So this is a very simple point-to-point integrations, like you want to integrate Excel and Salesforce, convert to a lead. And there are popular use cases that we got from our existing customers, and then what they are using already. And we are also trying to incorporate more templates into this method. So if you are trying out, if you see that a template that is helpful for you, feel free to give us a suggestion. We are more than happy to help you implement like a predefined template here. So here and then of course in the left hand side we have what we call an organization. So when you are signing up initially, you will be automatically creating an organization for you, and then you have different project spaces, and then inside these project spaces you can create multiple APIs, multiple proxies, schedule tasks, and so on. Another cool thing in the platform is that you have collaborative features built in. For example, if I go to my account settings, you can see I have members that who has access to my project space. I can see a list of them, and then the roles that they have, and also you can invite members and then define the roles that you want them to play in your project, whether you want to treat them as an admin, API publisher, or a developer, and so on. So the collaborative features, you don't have to do anything extra. It's built into the platform itself. And then we have what you call marketplace. So marketplace is where we store public and private connectors. So I'll touch upon private connectors as such. Private connectors are essentially connectors that within an organization, where all your developers within an organization can create and publish connectors for other developers to use. So we'll during the demo, I'll showcase creating a connector, and then of course reusing that connector. And then we have public connectors that connect to different data sources, different SaaS systems, and so on. So we'll be using MySQL connector here to connect to a database instance. And then we have insights. Of course, insights are statistics that you can get for consumption of your APIs and send services. So we'll come back to this in a bit. So here first I'm going to create a REST API. I'm going to go click from scratch, and then I'm going to give a name. I say BCS customers. And then you can create an external API that's publicly accessible, or a private internal API that's only accessible within Choreo. So we have different levels of this access, and then how you can grant access and provision external users. I'll be covering that as well. And click on next. So first option here is Choreo managed Git repository. So a Git repository will be automatically provisioned for you by the Choreo platform, and then we'll be using that to do store all source the source repo for this particular project. Or you have the option of connecting to your existing GitHub repository. You can authorize and then grant access. So for this example, we'll go with a Choreo managed repository, and this step it's going to create. It's going to take a couple of seconds here. What it's going to do is it's going to create a GitHub repository, provision the users, and then create a complete CI/CD pipeline out of it, and of course create different environments for a project. So a lot of the things that you might eventually have to do when you are starting a project is essentially automated in this step. Creating the source code repository, provisioning the users, and then giving them access, creating a CI/CD pipeline, and all of it is automated here. And then once the repo is created, it commits some initial code, and then you can see it's 11 seconds ago. There's a commit by the Choreo system, and this is like the overview page for a project. And then we visualize the code in a like a sequence diagrammatic view here, and then you can click on edit code button. So edit code button, what's going to happen is that we are going to do a git checkout of this repo into a temporary workspace. Let me quickly close this and then click on this, and then we are going to do a git checkout. Let me refresh again. I think my old session is getting conflicting here. Okay, single sign on into this, single sign on. Let's check out that. So we'll check out our existing git repo into a temporary workspace, and then we'll open up the source code view of it, and then we'll work through that. So let me log out here and then completely try with a new instance. So log in with Google.
While you're doing that, I'm wondering, is there
Yes.
a predefined build system such as Gradle or Maven that you use?
So we have our own build system that's built into the framework. That comes with the platform comes with the inbuilt build system, testing framework, and then being able to reuse in import export modules. And then it's all hooked up automatically once we create a project. So I'll showcase that as well. This one we just created, and then go to develop section first on the left hand side, and then click on edit code. Yeah, let me refresh the browser completely.
No effect, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's Choreo.dev. And then I'll use the Google sign-in, which is hooked up to my WSO2 account. And then I'm just logging in. Oops. Forgetting my password.
This is just the time to find out somebody to save with your account.
Yeah. Yeah. So sign in here. Yeah. All right. Huh.
That's incredibly annoying.
All right. This is let me good timing for this to happen.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
So I pause the recording for a moment.
sudo account didn't work, but what we can use is to create it. So I use my GitHub credentials and then logged in here. So we'll continue where we continue from the beginning. So we'll go to creating a REST API and then from scratch, and then we'll call it as BCS customer, publicly accessible. Next, Choreo managed repository create, and this is where that whole pipeline will come in. So we'll do a bunch of stuff in the background and then create, give you like an overview page, and from there onwards, the step is to click on the edit code button. So edit code button is where we open up the existing repo into do a git clone on a temporary workspace. And then we've also integrated the web-based version of Visual Studio Code that will open up that repo, and then we are working through like a cloud-based IDE. So click on edit code button again, and then
you call this project exactly the same as the previous one. How come there wasn't a clash?
No, this is a completely new organization, and yeah, so it's a new workspace, new organization that's not connected to the previous one in any way. So we have like a multi-tenanted way of creating organizations and projects, and also you can create a project interesting. All right. Not sure the team is doing any maintenance tasks here. Okay. All right, we are in. So it loads up the VS Code IDE and open up the project workspace, and then it will show the diagrammatic view. So this is where we design our code. So it generates this REST resource called greetings, and you'll see at this point we are working with the REST API. So all the things that you see are REST resources. So what I'm going to do here is remove this generated REST resource, and then we're going to add our own one resource called let's say get customers, and then return type it says error question mark happens to be and what it means is that it's an optional error. It can return nothing or optional error, and then I'm going to save here and do some editing later on. And then also I'm going to scroll a little bit up here and then define a record. Record is like a type. This is going to represent the result set that we're going to get from our database. So in I'm going to say the name of this is customer, and then I'm going to add a couple of fields that corresponds to the data that I have in my database. So first it's an integer. It's going to be customer number, and then I'm going to add another field which is going to be a string field that represent customer name, and also I have two other fields. One is an integer called credit limit, say credit limit, and then another string type called country. So there are a couple of other fields in my table, but let's say this is the minimum fields that we are interested in, and then just save this.
Is any sort of currency type supported?
Currency type?
Integer to represent the currency amount doesn't seem like a very good move.
Yes. So right now, based on my sample database, it's an integer field that's defined in the database itself. So the database that I got is a sample database from I think like a MySQL sample database that they have to explore data that has some customer data and then currency and payments, everything is integers. Definitely, if you are representing especially currency amounts, you would need to use a decimal or a float here. And then once you add a record, then what you're going to do is call it out to the database. So for that, we're going to use what you call a connector here. Click on add and then connector. And then I'm going to search for MySQL client, click on it, and then it asks certain parameters. So default parameters: host, user, password, database, and port. So since we are not dealing with as a programmer, it's not good practice to hard code these values, right? So we have a way, what you call configurable strings. Configurable strings are by default, it doesn't have a value. You can define a value, but we are going to inject it at runtime. So I'm going to click on this mark, which is going to ask, okay, configurable name, and I'm going to go with this. And then I'm going to do that to all the other fields to define some string variables that we are going to inject these values at runtime. Password, and then database, and then save, and then also port. We click on save. And then going to scroll down and then save the connection. So you can see pulling the packages. Essentially, it's getting all the connector code from the marketplace, and then now we have a connector defined here, MySQL endpoint. And then what I'm going to do now is click on this action, and then it will see, okay, what are the connectors that's already defined, and MySQL, and then you can define operations to do. So here I'm going to do a query type, and then I'm just going to leave it at 2 backticks. So this is defining essentially a string template where you can insert variables that you get and then define the query. And then I'm going to click on the save button here. And then also what we have is that once we work with connectors, you can see it generates a sequence diagrammatic view of it. So this is not just a diagrammatic editor, this also a fully fledged programming language. And then we have full parity between the programming language and the diagram. So I'm going to click on this source code view of it, which automatically generates the source code based on the corresponding diagram. And then I'm going to use here in this code to edit some of this REST resource. So here it says there's a service listening on HTTP listener, and then doesn't have any host names. You will see how it define and then attach host names, and it says get customers and returns an error. Here what I'm going to do now is we are going to return a list of customers. So customer, an array of customer, or an optional error would be the return type. And then we have already talking to the database. So I'm going to define my query here. And let's say for this customer, we are interested in, let's say we want to introduce a credit limit. So I'm going to attach, I'm going to say int credit limit. And this is conveniently for us, it's going to translate to a query parameter when we are calling this service. Credit limit, and then let's say I'm going to do a select query. Select customer number, customer name, and then country, and then other one is credit limit from customers. Let's also do where credit, we are interested in credit limit is greater than the variable, that input that we get. So the syntax here is at $, and then square curly braces, and say credit limit. And then once we do the query, it automatically gets into a stream that we don't have to deal with like a essentially a very efficient way of dealing with the result type, especially if it's a large query. You are not building the entire message in memory. You are processing the stream, and then by default it says record type, and here I'm going to say it's the type is customer, and then I'm going to remove all of this, and now we get a list of customers where credit limit is greater than the input limit that we give, and then I'm going to return this response. Here there's another capability in the platform called what you call query expressions. So once we get into a stream, it doesn't have to be just MySQL, but this is a generic data structure that's built into the platform, and say we can say syntax for this is we can say from query from customer C, the variable that we're interested in, and in query response, and you can see it automatically do autocorrect or auto suggestions IntelliSense for existing things that we have defined. From customer C in query response, we can also do where here, and then see country, let's say country equals USA, and then we can say select C. So this is going to build an array out of the result set, and then do further filtering on the country, and then I'm going to just return this whole thing. And if you make a syntax error, it suggests okay, missing semicolon, so it won't be able to compile. And then once you are done with it, then you can test this service that we just built. So let's do that. So we can click on run button here, which is going to compile this and then run. So before compilation time, it asks this configuration entries for host user password database, and then I'm going to give I created a sample database already for this from free MySQL hosting. So I'm going to get these values into it, and then my username and database is the same. Username and the database name is the same, and then password, and then port, of course, default 3306 for MySQL, and then click on run. So this is going to build the project and then run it, and then once the program is running, we can just do like developer testing. So as you can see, we don't have to rely on any external tools. Everything is built into the platform. It says running executable. Now we are ready to try it out. So click on try it, which is going to open up the open API spec for this. So as you can see, we didn't create there's no boilerplate code as such. The program that you see is a completely REST API on itself. And click on get customers, try it out. Credit limit, let's say 100K, and then execute, and it gets a result set. And since we filtered on the country, it says all the countries are based on US. So this is where you can iterate on developer test, and then test your integration of the project, and then once you are done, once you're happy, you can click on this source control and then do initial commit, and then commit these changes to the repository. Yes, stage, and then commit. I'm going to say yes, and then it's going to commit to the upstream repository that's created by Choreo. And then you can also do general source code management here. Like for example, when one typical use case is you want to work with feature branches, where you have your code, you want to create different branches and check it out. You can do that here as well. Like for example, if I want to do create branch, I'll say feature 1 something, and then the branches will get created, and then we have to push all these changes to the upstream repo, and then it will sync all the local changes because it's a temporary workspace into our upstream Choreo repository. Now we can see in the component overview section, if we just refresh this view, we'll be able to see the commits we made, the changes we made. Let's see this git fetch, it's upstream. Let's see, it's pushed. Probably it'll take a couple of seconds to push changes. Changes here, and then let's see. Yeah, feature branches branch is there. Our initial commit message, let's stage changes. Okay, let's probably take a couple of minutes to refresh. Yeah, and then once we are happy with it, of course, we can go to our deploy section. Let's change. Let's see. Choreo version 1. Didn't get. Yeah, let's go to the deployment section and see the. We have the commit changes. Let's double check on this. Yeah, close, and then no. Okay. For some reason doesn't let me edit code and see the the changes again. Okay, we have the changes there.
You didn't have to engage autosave, did you?
Sorry?
Did you have to engage autosave? No, it's there, isn't it?
No, yeah, it's there. So let's check with let's deploy and see whether our changes are there. I'm going to deploy this, and you can see we created two different environments here for deployment and production. And then once you click on deployment, this is gonna create a lot of steps on the background. So this is again where the platform capability shine. What we do is we at the initial stages we created an automated pipeline, and this is going to kick off that pipeline, and then this process it's going to do a build of the project, and then prepare all the files, create a Docker container out of this repo, and then build that image, and then push it to a local internal Docker registry, and then also generate Kubernetes artifacts for this service, and then deploy the service in a Kubernetes internal Kubernetes cluster. So that is gonna happen. So the development environment is a Kubernetes environment on its own, and then it's gonna build the project and then deploy that project into that environment. And then once you're done with testing, you can also promote it to the other environment, which is gonna then again kick off that same pipeline and deploy into a production environment. We just test here to see whether our changes are there. Hopefully it's there. So for this one, we need like the get test key here. Let's try test key. Try it out. Yeah, this is the old one we have. Let's let me go to develop and check whether it's not syncing. Yeah. Let me check changes. Let me add some more here.
branch is feature branch and we are checking in main, would that be an impact?
Yeah, let's me check on merge main.
You've got sharp eyesight.
Yeah, that's a good catch. Let's.
I love that feature that you immediately get told how long this, how much of your performance budget is going to be used up by this feature. That's really, really helpful.
So this one you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is essentially we are using some machine learning to do some predictions on based on the historical numbers that we've seen. We are doing like a forecasted performance for a single user. And then based on the tests and the development goes on, this number of course changes. And then commit, and then I'm gonna push these changes. Yeah, let's go and refresh feature branch. Okay. Yeah, feature branch. But yeah. So let's do a deployment on the feature branch that we did. So I'm gonna do a deployment here. Might have to merge the changes here. Branch, merge branch feature 1. And then, sorry, push. Let's see, branch. All right. Let's check whether we have that. Interesting.
I didn't quite understand what you were doing just now. It looked to me as though you were merging the main branch into feature branch.
Yeah, I was gonna merge the feature branch into the main branch.
Yeah. So I think that has happened. What you have to do is you have to change the branch. If you see at the bottom there is a branching icon, just change it to main. Yeah.
Oh, all the way down here, right? In that
Yeah.
blue. Yes.
And then now just push it. Go to the same section and do push.
Right. Let's.
Yeah, this would push the stuff first. I suppose the thing would now start syncing there.
Yes, let's check on that. Yes. Yeah. Thanks for it. Yeah. So let's do the deployment here on this change, config and deploy. And then at the deployment time, it asks the credentials. So I'm gonna get the same credentials that I had. Host, user, and the same for database. The password and the 3306. Which is going to inject again at runtime into the deployment environment. And then this is managed as at the deployment level as Kubernetes level secrets, and then it gets you can inject the same values into other environment as well. And then again we are doing the build here. And then it will build a new container image, push that container image, and then do a deployment, a rolling deployment to the existing Kubernetes cluster on the deployment environment. and then we'll test on the development environment, and then also we'll move the changes to production. So that entire pipeline is built into Choreo, so we didn't have to configure anything. And then a lot of the things that we have to do to create and then operationally manage is essentially automated for you. And another advantage that we are trying to provide over something like someone using AWS or Azure or GCP is that rather than at the component level, rather than at the infrastructure component level, give a higher level abstract where all the best practices and the components are pre-integrated. So it's generate a security header already, and then we can test this out in the development environment. Can click on get customer and then try it out, and then say 100K, execute, and then let's see, get customers. Maybe takes a couple of time to deploy it. Let's check. Okay. Give some more minutes here. Let's do a refresh on this. Get test key. It might take some time to deploy, I think. Yeah, so in the meantime, I'll go ahead and then go to the deploy section and then promote this to the production environment as well. So here we can use, you don't have to, you can also supply new values in the for the database, the user and the schema, the password, port, etc. And also you have the option of using the same development environment config, and then reusing that to do the production environment as well. And then it asks whether we need to change anything here. Right now for this demo there's no changes, and then we'll promote it to production. So once we have promote it to production, you can click on this manage tab, which is essentially API lifecycle management for this API. And then you can see right now it's at created state. So right now it's not visible to anyone in the organization. We can click on publish, which is gonna publish this API, and then we'll also gonna publish a connector internally. Let's say it's a private connector only available within the organization. You can also do a public connector which is accessible or visible to everyone as well. So you'll choose a private connector and then publish a connector for this API. And then you can also have attached documentations and then usage plans for this API. And then entire API management lifecycle capabilities is also built into the framework. You don't have to do separate API lifecycle management for the projects.
Is there any kind of authentication and authorization associated with APIs?
Yes, Imo. So by default, we are using auth credentials to access these APIs. And then I'll show how these consumers are also, you can create consumers and then enable external consumers to access these as well. So consumers, you can see we don't have any subscriptions. And then on the usage plans, you can define rate limiting policies for these APIs. And then settings on security and other course level configuration. If you want to bypass certain custom headers, you can enable through course, and then of course attach some properties on the business owner, business email, and so on. Once you have that API, so now we have this customer API. Let me double check on, go to testing and see whether we have be able to test this out in the prod environment. Just 200k upstream connect. Okay, might be load balance configuration still not healthy. Yeah, I'm gonna go to the next section of it. So next up is that we're going to create another API from scratch. Let's say BCS payments, and let's say it's a public accessible API, and then similarly Choreo managed repository. So this is the second service that we're going to create that's going to reuse that existing connector that we developed. So we'll use that connector to invoke that the existing service, the customer service that we created, and get a response back, and then again talk to the database to get some payment information, and then give like output back to the customer or back to the client of the app. Similarly, we'll click on edit code button, and which is going to provision this to a temporary Git repo, and then open up the VS Code editor. So it's going to take a couple of seconds to start here, and then once we have that, we'll go on with the development flow. We'll create reuse a connector, and then call that API. So once you have the diagram, let's open up the source code view as well. So I'm going to remove this resource view and add a new resource. Say get payments, and save. And we are going to use a connector, and I'm going to use get I think BCS customer, the connector we just published, and then it asks credentials because it's an API, REST API. We need to provide API credentials to access it. So here I'm going to click on the developer portal, which is going to open up the developer portal, and we can create applications and then create subscriptions for this. So I'm going to click on application, create an application, say BCS app, and then you also have rate limiting a quota for the application as well. Create, and then tokens, generate credentials, subscriptions. I'm going to add BCS customer as a subscription, and go back here. Sorry, tokens and consumer key, consumer secret. I'm just going to copy this value, and then client ID and consumer secret, and then continue to invoke the API, and the operation is get customers, and the credit limit, let's say 100k. Save, and then it gets its types automatically. So we also need a way to represent a payment that has a couple of additional fields. We can add a different record here, say payment, and payment I'll say we have right now an integer which is the customer number, and I'll just have this one, and we can with a select query we'll get all the other fields. You can also restrict certain fields if you want to restrict the message, but it'll add all the additional fields to this once you do a select query. And then I'm going to use the MySQL connector here. Let's define that as well. Use a connector, MySQL Again, we'll define configurable entries. So credentials are not hard coded into the program. Click on save and click on save. Save connection. And then once the package is there, we'll click on add here and then action. We'll call the MySQL endpoint and query, and let's do an empty query here, and then I'm gonna save it, which is gonna create the code, and then I'm gonna remove all of this, and then say this is gonna accept payment type, and we'll define the query here. Let's say what we're interested in, select star from payments, where customer number is, we'll get here we can also iterate from the customer response that we get, but for this example we'll just get one customer. So we can say get customers response, and we'll get the first value of it, and then customer number, and then likewise if there are many customers we can filter that out, just like before. We'll say from payment P in query response. We can also do filtering here, but we'll say we can say limit to select P. See, so we are limiting just for 2 records, and then return, and then colon, and then we have to change, of course, the return type as well to return an array of payment or error. And then we can like before, we'll use the source code again to just commit, and then to stage all the changes, say yes, which is gonna commit, and then we'll push these changes. Push these changes as well. Once we push these changes, we can do let's say sync with, yeah, once it's synced, let's give a couple of minutes. Yeah, so I'll move on here, and then once we have the changes, we can do the deployment like before, and then this is our payments one, and then we'll do config and deploy, and again we need to give the credentials. I'll just give the credentials. Host, and then user, the database name is same, and my password, and 3306. And then once we deployed it to production, I'm going to show you the user management part of it. I think that's the part that we didn't touch here. And then again, this is going to build a Docker container for our service, and then deploy it.
Notice that you subscripted the list with the 1. Is it in this language, is everything 1 based?
Sorry, Mo, I didn't quite get that.
We retrieved a list of customers and then took the first element, and that was
Yes.
the subscript 1 rather than 0 as we're used to from Java and the like.
Yeah, it's zero based. I just got the first element there. Sorry, the second element there.
Oh, did you?
It's zero based, yeah. And once this is deployed, we'll straight away promote it to the production environment, and I want to showcase the API consumer part of things, how users are defined there. So we'll straight away go to manage, and then click on lifecycle, and then publish this API. And for this, no need of a connector. We have a publicly facing API. So publish, and then we'll go to developer portal. Once you go to developer portal, to Choreo, browse APIs, and the payments API that we just created, and then on the you can see credentials. We can generate credentials which generate O2 tokens, and you can try out. We have documentations when you are attaching. If you attach documentations, you will be able to see it here. And then based on the Swagger definition, we also do a SDK generation. You can download a SDK for the Swagger definition that correspond to the API. So once you have this, if you go to applications, you can define applications and define your subscriptions there. And on the let me go to payments. Sorry, let's go application and then VCS app subscriptions, and then also add a subscription to the payments API. And we can bring in, so this is where it gets interesting. So you can define auth tokens that is primarily for internal users. You can also define external IDPs that you can now use to define bring in external users. So to do that, I'm going to click on my settings, and then you can see on API management. Right now there are no IDPs connected. So if you click on add IDP, so Escardio is WSO2's own identity as a service, and we also support bring in Microsoft Okta, Auth0, and we are working on bringing Google soon. So if you click on Escardio, it asks to provide credentials, and then you can use that. And then let me see if I can log into Escardio. Let's say sign in. I'm just giving a unique organization ID. Once you create an organization, you can create different applications inside of it, and then you can bring in this set of users that you define inside that application back to the Choreo site. So you can, let's say I want to define a traditional web app. It's OpenID Connect base. Payments, and authorized URL is the app URL. I'll just say example.com, and then once you register the application, you can see you can go to and this gives you all the parameters at the application level. You can see OpenID details, and then sign in method, etc. And you can choose to enable, disable consent screens, and then if you go to click on manage, and then you can see users. You can add all the external facing customers or your users here, and then they will be able to use the published API that we create at the Choreo side once you get this complete. So that is how we provision external entities, external customers to be able to access an API. And also we are working on right now this platform is running on Azure as a SaaS service. We are also planning to so now we've done our work to enable private data planes. Private data planes essentially is your own data plane that's running just for you when you are deploying your integration services APIs in a private environment. And also we are working on hybrid deployments as well, where you can run the data plane on pretty much any on a pretty much any Kubernetes cluster outside of the Choreo, and then still use Choreo as a control plane to access the services. And I would like to stop at this point and see if you have any questions.
Well, I have to say, I was skeptical before you showed us this that you could actually put together a real distributed microservices architecture in just an hour, but you've done it, so I'm amazed. Any questions from the audience? Maybe I can ask the obvious question. If one decides to go with this technology, what's it going to cost us to try it out, and what's it going to cost us to actually adopt it out?
Right. So we have a pricing model published based on what we call steps that includes a number of API calls, number of integrations that you are defining, but essentially we are still at the very beginning stage. So we are very, very flexible on the pricing model, and based on you can get started for free, and then based on your enterprise needs, please contact us. We'll be more than happy to give numbers for you. So that's what we are doing in this initial phase. We are trying to work with customers who are we have about a handful of customers who are essentially paid and then start using the platform. So explore more, and then see talk to us on your use cases and what are the things you are planning to do. We are more than happy to work with you and then give you help you out to get started, and then of course give you more concrete numbers.
Yeah, I work for a consultancy, so we wouldn't be consuming this technology ourselves, but we might want to use it on a client project. So
absolutely,
I guess we'd start off with something like a proof of concept, show some sort of vertical slice of the application that they want to develop, and based on the speed of development and the robustness of the whole solution, we could presumably come to an agreement, because this would save us so much development effort.
Exactly. I think that's the use cases that we are trying to pitch as well. We are like the entire infrastructure. You don't have to really worry about individual components, right? So that there are everything is sort of ready built in, and that's essentially our positioning as well, to be able to enable customers, developers, and users to create, concentrate on the applications, services, and then essentially provide a more robust digital experience and bring in these capabilities very, very fast to an organization.
In the past, I've used various application frameworks, and they're all designed to make common use cases easy to develop. But it's when you come to try and do the special stuff that you end up spending as much effort trying to bend this new tool to your desires as it would have been done if you'd used just standard tooling. do you have a feel for, for example, if a customer wants to build some kind of geographical information into the system and they display a section of a map within the app, how difficult is this kind of special requirements to fulfill?
Yes, I think that's a great question. So right now, we for the capabilities that we have is essentially catering to like a backend as a service, right? How you create APIs, how you host your backends, how you create your backends, and so on. So we are also working with exploring a couple of our partners on a couple of partners and other external organizations to whether we can partner with and bring in the front end capability as well into the platform. So that is essentially where you would create like the front end or the rendering piece of it, whether it's HTML based, whether calling to, as I said, like calling to Google APIs for maps, and then use Choreo to get certain maybe coordinates and then do an overlay on the map and then display like certain POIs or certain like routes, etc. So the front end part we are still exploring, and then our plan is to, once we finalize that, bring in the front end capability also into the platform. So you have the entire application development experience ready built in the platform itself without having to externalize. And also I think on the backend portion right now I used like an externally hosted MySQL instance. We are also thinking of providing data storage capabilities and then queuing infrastructure and other infrastructure services that you would probably need as platform connectors without having to rely on like external databases. We'll still of course support connecting to external providers, but there will be some inbuilt data storage capabilities as well.
And then I suppose another important question from the point of view of acceptability is, I mean, you're still very much in the startup mode. Supposing that the company goes out of business in a couple of years, are customers then left high and dry with an application they can no longer use?
Yes, so that's a great question. So based on I think recently, so based on our investment into the platform, we secured like a 90 million funding from Goldman Sachs. So this project, this platform, the capabilities that we build has like a tremendous momentum, and then we are doing lots of development and then investing heavily into the platform. And the other one is, I think that's the most important part, where when someone think about these SaaS products, right? So there's a massive risk of lock-in to a certain SaaS provider. So if you look at Choreo, the development is done using a programming language called Ballerina. So Ballerina is an open source programming language. So if you are not really happy with Choreo, you can take the same code and host it on a different system. So without making any changes to your code. So there's absolutely no like vendor lock-in that you get with Choreo platform, because you can move the code anywhere. And also we support bring in your existing GitHub repository and then deploy that and then edit that and essentially do all the entire feature set that's built into Choreo within your own GitHub repo, right? And then if you're not happy, you can take the same GitHub repo, use Ballerina, and then host it somewhere else. So absolutely no lock-in provided by Choreo.
Super answer, thank you. Well, we've come just about to the end of the time allotted. I would like to ask if there's anybody else who's interested in a question. Oh, Sai has asked me a question. Yeah, I'll pass this one on. Does this tool support connectors to connect to privately hosted databases or caching systems?
Yes. So privately hosted databases, yes. So the infrastructure, if you have a VPN, will work with you to enable like a VPN connection within your tenancy to your private databases. But if it's accessible through a public, still the same thing I use with a password, username password, you can use. But if it's inside a VPN connection, we'll work with you to enable that connection. On the marketplace front, we support multiple connectors to different data stores like Amazon Cosmos DB, PostgreSQL, MySQL, and then Azure Messaging Service, etc. And also on the caching front, we do also support Redis cache. You can use Redis client to connect to an existing Redis cluster and then use that as a caching layer. And also when you are working with the language, you will feel I encourage you to go and then try it out. You've probably seen we didn't think about like data binding, so we didn't have to rely on external libraries to work with, like the JSON messaging. So that also built into the platform itself, so that it's native when it comes to working with JSON, working with REST APIs, cloud native, and other cloud native systems.